April 11, 2024, Board of Directors meeting, Sports Authority. The first thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 14th, 2024 meeting. Has everyone had, on the board had a chance to read the minutes? Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion is passed for approval. Next on the agenda is a update on the traffic study for the stadium. Chief of Staff Freeman, thank you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of the board. Jermaine Freeman from the city of Chattanooga. We know that the traffic impact study has been a repeated topic of conversation and a repeated point of interest for this board. And so the initial traffic impact study, as you all may recall from our last meeting, was initiated by Perimeter Properties. And so I'm going to ask them to come up to sort of take us through the initial traffic impact study.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andy Stone. I'm with Perimeter Properties. Today, we're going to have Labella, who is one of our consulting engineering teams, who managed this study for us, give you all a presentation about the traffic impact statement and study that has been done for the project. Just a couple things to keep in mind. This is one snapshot in time. Traffic impact statements in general, you're looking at sort of the project as it relates. There's also, and they'll talk a little bit more about this, but Broad Street's an interesting road. It's under the jurisdiction of the city of Chattanooga. It's also under the jurisdiction of the Tennessee Department of Transportation as a reliever from 24. And so you'll see references to both of those things. So, but we're going to introduce Caitlin Sims, who's an engineer with Labella and here local in the Chattanooga office. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Sims from Labella, as Andy mentioned, and here to give you a brief update on the traffic impact study that we have ongoing right now. Feel free to ask questions as you see fit, or if you'd like to go over something at the end of the presentation is fine too. So all the participants that came into this traffic study, obviously it was initially initiated by Perimeter Properties, but we've also talked with Hardball Capital and City of Chattanooga. We've also coordinated with this CDOT department and Tennessee Department of Transportation as well, since they're all entities that have impacts in this area. And it was completed by Labella Associates and Mar Traffic, which completed our traffic counts. So to give you a little bit of history on this project, we started this back last summer, so last July, and unfortunately in the summertime you can't do traffic counts because school is not in session. And that has a great impact on the normal traffic we're trying to make sure we don't create anymore, but you need people in school for those traffic counts to be present. So on top of that, we also had the frontage road that's along the interstate that was under construction and definitely impacts this project site. So we needed that completed as well. And if you remember last summer, TDOT was also doing rolling lane closures on the interstate and diverting traffic onto Broad. So we had to wait for all of those items to be finished, school to be in session, it not to be a holiday weekend, it not to have an Ironman going on in town that would detour traffic around critical intersections. So trying to find that perfect time, we ended up in late September, early October, right before the kids' fall break, doing traffic counts. And those were delivered late winter. So they do all the counts at one time, but then they have to process all the data, make sure it's sent over to us to be analyzed. In late December, early January, we also looked at what the phase one capacities are going to be. So kind of narrowing down how much retail, how much residential are we looking at the same time, which we're calling phase one, which is opening day of the ballpark. So what in that general time is going to be opened or soon following the stadium. And so this data is currently still being analyzed and recommendations are being formed. Initially, we picked 10 intersections that you can see on this map are all near the project site. These we felt like were critical from our perspective to make sure that traffic in the area was reviewed. In discussions before we even started the traffic counts, we discussed with CDOT and TDOT representatives and added 8 more intersections to this study area. So we are at a total of 18 intersections that were reviewed and counted during this time. So what that came down to is typically a traffic study will just look at AM peak and PM peak. For this particular study, we actually added in weekday PM, which covers, or weekday peak, which covers 12 to 3. So that includes lunch crowds and school being let out, as well as custom time periods, which were Friday 6 to 8, which would be similar to something like a ball game starting or ending, and weekend afternoons. So those were additional time periods that we're reviewing within our traffic study to make sure we're kind of encompassing the full needs of this area. What was recorded in the traffic study were any commuter vehicles, any heavy trucks, but we also included bicyclists and pedestrians as well. And as you can see from this diagram down here, those are the kind of counts we would get back on each intersection, what turning movements were, which direction they were headed, and who was headed in that direction. The conditions we're looking at is existing. So that's today as is, before any development has started, before anything is assumed. What are the current conditions of those 18 intersections? Additionally, we have the no build conditions. So that's just looking at percentage growth across the area, but without our development. So any known developments we have in permitting, or the city has in permitting that we know will be built in the next few years, but not including our development. And then the build condition applies all known developments as well as the percentage growth as well as our development. So right now, as we finish up our traffic study, we are looking at improvement strategies like event management or intersection timing, as well as striping modifications that could also help alleviate traffic. So right now, as we finalize our report, which is hopefully coming in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we are also working and starting to reach out to entities like CARTA or Intelligent Cities, which we recently learned has an interesting project in this area as well, and engage other entities like CDOT and TDOT again with our findings and coming up with plans for the future. That is all I have today, but do you have any questions?
Will we get a copy of this?
To my knowledge, yes. When that's shared with the city, you will also receive a copy.
Okay, can you go back one slide?
Yes.
Thank you. So CARTA's not involved now?
They are not. So at this point, we are discussing with them on the civil side, but on the traffic improvement side, we're just beginning those discussions of bus corridors and other improvements we can make.
Just to add, we have met with Charles Frazier to start the conversations. But again, you got to step through the process, right? So getting the counts, initial analysis, where do we start from? What are those impacts going to be? And then you start layering these things on, These are relatively complex. And Caitlin, can you flip back 2 slides? So if you look at the analysis area, keep going, sorry, right there. So when you start looking at this goes all the way from the Publix, 17 and 18 are the intersections as you come by the Publix, all the way to like 11 and 12 are Chestnut and 23rd, right? So by Finley Stadium. So you're looking at a really large area. And we were talking with Bill and his team yesterday at the city, and we were saying, one of the other things that this does not contemplate is the other developments that are going to happen in the area. And so how we layer those in, how and who layers that in the future has to be discussed and worked through. And we had a good conversation yesterday about that. So as we go through this, it's not just one project and one snapshot, it's sort of a multitude of things.
Right. Thank you all for your work in
Absolutely.
this report. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is an update on the approval process for the stadium. Mike?
Yes, thank you. So what I want to do is just to sort of give you a brief overview of where we are in the overall approval process. And I got a slide that'll pop up on the screen in just a second. But to sort of give everyone sort of a indication of where we are. So the last significant action that was taken was on March the 25th. On March the 25th, there was a joint meeting of the City of Chattanooga's Industrial Development Board with the Hamilton County's Industrial Development Board. And they met here in this room to review amendments to the economic impact plans that would be needed in order for the structure of the MOU that the city, county, and sports authority have agreed to. In order for that MOU to be enforced, the economic impact plans have to be amended. Both IDBs voted to approve those amendments for consideration and to move them on to the city council and county commission for the next step. So the city council and county commission at this point have one final vote that needs to come before them for them to approve those amendments to the economic impact plans. With that vote, it is our expectation that there would also be a development agreement that both the city council and county commission would be able to see, that would be tied, that would sort of go through and be voted on with the amendments to the economic impact plans. Aside from the development agreement, though, there are several other large and weighty agreements that need to also be done, some of which apply very specifically to this board. And so within the next 10 days, what you will start to see is you will start to see the team lease agreement, the bond indenture, and a note for stadium financing to start to come before you, because those are pretty weighty documents, and they're going to take a while to review. But we will start to roll those out. Our expectation is to do that within the next 10 days. And so these are all big documents. There's also, I think I did also mention the donation agreement, which of course is the agreement by which the Sports Authority would be entering into an agreement with Perimeter Properties, or with Pipe Properties more specifically. And then of course we've got the bond indenture and the stadium financing. And so that's sort of where we are in the process. I think that we are anticipating having this vote come before the City Council and County Commission within the next few weeks with the development agreement. And so, and again, we're going to try to coordinate all of this because there's also obviously lots of moving parts that have to happen through this process. But with that, I will take any questions because I know that those are some big documents, and I know that there's probably a few questions there.
Questions?
Yeah, it's mentioned in here, you know, I guess, and I think I asked about it last meeting, and Mark said that it was still in talks in terms of the development agreement. I mean, my viewpoint would be that probably the two vital pieces of the entire program in terms of the taxpayer and the community itself is the CBA and the development agreement. Any headway on the development agreement? I think at that point he said there were two primary, you know, structures that were in talks of being, you know, guaranteed's the wrong word, but you know, so any progress on that?
Yes, so we are in active negotiations with all parties around the development agreement. And so without getting sort of too much into the details or in the weeds of it, we are making progress. And I anticipate that we'll be able to get to a good place on the development agreement pretty soon. You know, at the meeting, the joint meeting of both industrial development boards, you know, it was also very clear from both the city and county that the development agreement needed to happen at the same time as the city council and county commission taking their final votes. So it is our anticipation that that development agreement is going to come before the city council and county commission at the same time.
Yeah, I think that vote is semi-dependent upon seeing that, right? So
That's right. That's right.
How about the CBA?
So the community benefits agreement is a work in progress. We have, And I know we have representatives here from Caleb who may want to share some of their thoughts and viewpoints. As you know, the city, county, and the sports authority cannot be party to the CBA. Right. The CBA has to be an agreement that is between the private parties and outside organizations. The city's expectation is that there will continue to be a community benefits agreement, and that community benefits agreement will specifically address issues such as affordable housing interventions, DBE participation, which we've talked about at our last meeting, partnerships for Howard High School, and then opportunities for contractors to work within the stadium once the stadium is open and operating. So our anticipation is that there will be a community benefits agreement. I think at this point, there's maybe probably about to be a bit of a shift in terms of who the primary organization is that represents the community in those talks. But the city's expectation is that there will be a community benefits agreement to address some of those big priorities that we think that the community cares about. I will go ahead and say to some of the things that the community cares about, some of the things that are beneficial to the community, those things are already starting to take place. So for example, the county's willingness to go ahead, and all credit to Hamilton County government for doing this, but the county's willingness to go ahead and devote $10 million to Howard is a pretty meaningful community benefit. And that was something that I think Caleb and some of the external organizations had asked for in their early negotiations was, could there be significant or meaningful financial support for Howard? And the county has delivered on that in their own way. So there are going to be ways that we address a lot of the community concerns that may sort of be outside of the community benefits agreement, outside of the formal community benefits agreement. But it is our expectation and goal to make sure that we are addressing many of those things. At the same time, and along that same track, the push to push our construction manager at risk to use 30% of diverse businesses for contracts, that is something that the city pushed for, and something that we went ahead and pushed for. And that was also, I think, an early concern from some of our outside community groups was, what would DBE participation look like? And so, again, there are going to be ways that we're going to address different types of community concerns. Whether those things are addressed inside of the formal agreement or not, we will figure out a way to address as much as we can. I can't promise that, of course, again, the city's not party to it, and I can't promise that Perimeter Properties or the Lookouts will be able to, commit to everything that every community group wants, but because there are obviously limitations to what they can do. But I can assure you that our expectation is that, things like affordable housing, DBE participation, as I said before, support for Howard, ways of doing business with the Lookouts after the stadium is open, that those things will be addressed in addition to environmental sustainability. And then I think, as you heard from the traffic study, we will continue to have robust conversations with CARTA on what multimodal transit can look like in the district as we move forward. But I understand that this is a long and complicated process, and it can be frustrating at times, and it can sort of hit some bumps here and there. But we are still anticipating moving forward and continuing to work with South Chattanooga Community Association to get some things done.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any representative from Caleb here today?
We do.
Do you have an update on the agreement?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jeff Meldal, and I'm a member of Caleb, co-chair of the Economic Mobility Task Force. I live in South Chattanooga. And on behalf of the negotiating team of the South Broad Community Benefits Coalition, which, as you know, was constituted in September of 2022 with the cooperation of the South Chattanooga Community Association, Community Association of St. Elmo, Mary Walker Towers Residents Council, Bethlehem Center, Chattanooga Building Trades, Iron Workers, IBEW, Chattanooga Area Labor Council, Green Spaces, SEIU, and Caleb. our negotiating team has sort of come to the end of they feel they've gotten as far as they can and that we've sort of hit a wall on negotiations. And so they are, as of now, ceasing negotiations for the CBA with our counterparts on the development side. And also, we were not able to reach a satisfactory supplementary MOU with, in your sort of preliminary negotiations with the city and county and the lawyers. So part of the reason this has sort of fallen apart, I think, for us is a large section of our initial demands or vision for the agreement concerned safeguards for high road contracting and sort of creative strategies for making sure that these jobs go to benefit the jobs creating the stadium, in the stadium, and in the broader development go to local residents and are being performed for high road contractors who have high safety standards and adequate worker training so that we can really put the people who are doing this work onto a path toward dignified life in the city that they're building. So these were they were demands that have been in our packets that you all had from way back and that we've had since the beginning, and they were sort of orphans of this difficult sort of ownership structure and this restrictions on contracting standards that state and federal laws impose. And one of the major reasons for having a CBA is to fill in the gaps of what city government or county government can't do in terms of direct negotiations with a development partner. And I think the CBA, as CBA, has sort of acquired this kind of mystique. It has like an aura around it, but of course we were interested in being a party to the first CBA negotiated in Chattanooga, but fundamentally what we're after is the concrete benefits that we outlined that our community put forward in the winter of 2022. And as Jermaine was pointing out, a lot of these things can be done in the development agreement, can be done by, the sort of subsidiary things. They don't require a CBA to be made to happen. Like the CARTA agreement, we hope that there will be a mobility center. That can be negotiated with CARTA directly. Our coalition doesn't need to have a part of that. What we wanted to do was get a robust agreement that would ensure these things are going to happen, that would be legally binding, and that we would have as a legal recourse in case some of these conditions weren't met. It doesn't mean that these things can't happen, and indeed we have the promises of Jim and the rest of the development coalition that they plan to do these things, which is good. We feel fortunate to have amenable partners. Our frustrations have been with the impossibility of getting these things into binding legal language that we feel would really be enforceable, and with this large gap that has made it impossible for us to get these standards around contracting, especially it's a critical part of what we want to see. We want to make sure that these jobs are going to Chattanoogans and that they are safe jobs that provide a path to the middle class. So all that is to say, we've taken this, our negotiating team feels like they've taken it as far as they can. And, you know, our demands are out there. Our vision for the city that was put together over the course of 14 community meetings over a year, 15 months ago, it's out there, and though we're frustrated that we're not going to have a CBA in hand as the coalition, we are still hopeful that through the development agreement and these, in the course of the development in general, we can ensure that we get things like 30% of the housing being affordable at 60 to 100% AMI. So we could have the Carter Center, that we could have environmental building standards like we had in the Bend Agreement. These are things that can exist outside of a CBA, and we hope that they will. But I'm of course happy to answer any questions you have as well.
I want to voice my support for the community benefits agreement. I understand it's complicated, a lot of moving parts, and as we move through this process of this stadium, it's not going to stop being complicated. So I agree with Jermaine that maybe the platform changes a little bit as to who's involved in it. I want to thank Caleb for your actions and trying to do the right thing, and I think we'll get some parts and pieces from that as we move forward. So I just want to voice my support that I think it would be beneficial to the neighborhood. It also goes along with honoring that it was an African-American neighborhood, and that I think we'll reach a good end goal. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Weeks. And as I mentioned before, it is the city's expectation that the community benefits agreement discussion will continue to move forward with South Chattanooga Community Association. Again, the South Chattanooga Community Association represents the historic neighborhoods of Southside Gardens, Hooterville, and Alton Park. And any other neighborhood association that wants to participate, we would encourage our private parties to work with in that regard. But again, as these are complicated deals, unfortunately, the deals in any agreement, in every agreement that I've had the ability to be a part of, no side ever gets everything that they want. But we do applaud Caleb for bringing forth some things that we, the city and the county, definitely needed to hear. Again, they advocated very early on for financial support for the Howard School, and credit to Hamilton County for following through on that and doing that with the $10 million commitment to Howard, and then $5 million of additional revenue for other schools on the south side. They also advocated very early on for diverse business participation, which is what had the city's public works department to sit down and to push the construction manager at risk goals to 30% DBE participation, which is over and above what we typically see on city contracts. And so now to Mr. Meldal's point, we are limited as a sports authority, as a quasi-governmental body, on what you can do in terms of labor contracts and contracts around labor participation. And there are many laws that govern how cities, counties, and quasi-governmental bodies can participate in that regard. And I realize that can be challenging, but that is the world that we live in, and we do the best we can in that world. So.
Thank you, Jermaine.
Yes, ma'am. I have one question.
Yeah, Jermaine, as the attorney for this board here in connection with this, one of my concerns has been at least protection for this body, since they're going to be the owners of this structure based upon the donation agreement. So we are paying close attention to the terms of that and what protection can be provided to this board based upon the donation occurring. So I just wanted to make sure we had that on the record here, and we're trying to at least provide that protection within that document to protect this board.
Thank you.
Because they will be the owners of the property during the term.
That is right. They will be the owners of the property for at least 30 years.
Yes, sir. I'm wearing my hat as the attorney for this board at this point. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any more questions from the board?
I got something I want to add. I went to the opening night at the Lookouts last night, and despite the bad weather and everything, the crowd was not what Rich wanted, I'm sure, but I want to brag on your staff. They were more than prepared on opening night, and I especially want to brag on the ballet guys out front. I'm handicapped, of course, but and old and decrepit, but those guys helped me beyond what they should have done, and I appreciate that. And the whole staff was just great. Rich, you did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. One other point that I wanted to just add, we had hoped, if I may, Mr. Chair, we had really hoped to get you all out to the site for a tour today. However, the weather this week has not been very cooperative for that. As you can imagine, it's pretty muddy out there. So we're gonna reschedule that tour to hopefully a day and time when it's drier and not so muddy, so that we can get you out there for a tour, and Jim Irwin can take you through and show you all the different directions where he's gonna do cool things. But I just wanted to let you know that we will be rescheduling that tour.
Thank you. Is there any other business? If not, the meeting is adjourned.